I don't think crying is a weakness no more than I think not smiling should be seen as being strong. I don't know if I talked about it in the book, but I need to on my next one. I took away my smile. I took away my smile when I was 15 years old.
Welcome to Vulnerability Muscle, the empowering podcast challenging norms and guiding you to find strength and power through vulnerability. I'm your host, Reggie D. Ford. In a world that often portrays vulnerability as a sign of weakness, I believe it is a source of tremendous strength and authenticity. Through insightful conversations and thought provoking interviews, Vulnerability Muscle aims to redefine vulnerability and help listeners develop a new perspective on their own lives. Each episode of Vulnerability Muscle delves into a variety of topics such as mental health, social issues, and mindset shifts. We explore the power of vulnerability in healing, building resilience, and promoting personal growth, as well as fostering meaningful connections. This podcast provides practical tools and strategies to navigate life's challenges, overcome adversity, and create more inclusive and just environments for all people. In this episode, our guest is Eric Brown Jr. Eric is a politico, community organizer, cultural ethicist, hip hop enthusiast, and former ordained Baptist minister. A native Nashvilleian, Eric is a graduate of American Baptist College, Vanderbilt University, and Vanderbilt Divinity School. Eric writes about complex subjects in a plain speech fashion to detail rare honesty in a politically correct world. Eric is a phenomenal individual. He wrote this book called Weekend Reflections, which is all about embracing vulnerability. There are so many things and lines that I've underlined in here that just talk about who Eric is. One is these self-imposed boundaries and limitations prohibit me from explaining my plight to other Black men. But I think he's fought through that, and we actually get through a lot of those boundaries and self-limiting beliefs that he's had, and we have a conversation and with two Black men. He talks about wanting to feel whole. I think one of the things that keeps coming up throughout this conversation is fighting against societal expectations of how you're supposed to show up emotionally as a person, but especially as a Black man. We talk about all of the difficulties that a life can bring, from loss of loved ones and friends to marital strife to even navigating career as a very intelligent and educated Black man, and all the things that come along with that. Eric is a community organizer and has so much political knowledge, but history of knowledge of history and all the things that make up a world that we see today. Excited for you all to hear this conversation. It is amazing, and it is going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to listen to over and over again. So, with no further ado, let's embrace vulnerability with Eric Brown. Eric, my man, what's up, bro? How you doing today?
Doing good, Reggie. How you doing?
I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed. I'm in a good space. I'm excited about this podcast. Super excited about this conversation with you. Every time we get together, it's nothing but depth and vulnerability, and I'm just looking forward to it.
Likewise, man. Likewise, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, I want to first touch on, because we're in this election race in Nashville, and so you are a politico. You're in the political space as a strategist, as someone who knows way more about politics than I do. Tell me what is going on in your life right now.
Well, number one, thank you, Reggie, for allowing me to be on Embracing Vulnerability. I really appreciate that. It's always good when somebody chooses to want to have an interview with you, speak with you. So, I don't take that lightly. So, thank you for that. So, I'm actually working for one of the mayoral candidates. Don't want to say their name right now, at least until after the election is over. But I think they're a very great candidate. They're mayoral candidate. I'm their deputy campaign manager. And I think Nashville is in a very pivotal place. We're about to have our 10th mayor. The current mayor that we have is not going to run for office. We're having this fight that's going on between the state, which is being a more GOP dominant government, regardless of what people's political views are, And with Nashville being probably one of the most progressive cities in the state of Tennessee, there's a war that's going on there. We're seeing that Tennessee is no longer what I like to say is the teenager anymore. We're going into adulthood. But
Hmm.
the problem with that is that we need to learn how to pay bills. We need to live in our own house,
That's
start wearing
real.
suits and dress, business dresses. And we're not doing none of that yet because we still are operating like the cool kid in school, not realizing that now we have responsibilities. And so, talk about transit or transportation, public transportation, talking about just the economics of the city in general, talking about are we trying to be a city for tourists or are we trying to be a city for the residents that live here in this city? We're just in a very, very strange place that we're really going to need a leader that one can work across the aisles, two can make this also a city not only for those who want to visit, but definitely make sure that it feels like home to those who are still here, and that we're able to move from point A to point B with not so much interruption that we're seeing so far. And so, between our council at large, I think as far as our mayoral race, we have about 13. Well, we actually have about 12 now. One candidate just dropped out. We have about 20 council at large members that are running for 5 seats. And of course, we still have our council districts, which the state at one time tried to shrink it to 20. It passed, but it got halted by a larger court. And so that won't happen until about 2027. So we still have about a 40-member board, which is still a pretty large board. I think
Hmm.
we're the third largest government in the nation behind New York and LA. And
Wow.
so we need that as far as a city. I think one because the residents themselves voted to keep it a 40-member board, but two, it really does keep the diversity of the voices in the communities that we have, and shrinking it to 20 um, really does take away certain voices within our community. So yeah, man, we're in a very, very important place, and I know every election, everybody says it's the most important election. I get that, but seriously, right now we are in an important election. I think everybody likes to vote for presidents, but we don't think about how much
True.
our local government really affects us right now. So that was a
Yeah.
long way to say that we are in a very important time that we need to really get people out to vote.
We are, and I love that you said that about the presidential election is the one that everybody, well, not everybody, but most people show up for at the polls on that day. But from the day to day, you going to work, you coming home, you dealing with your family, you dealing with your life. A lot of that is impacted by the local elections and the local politicians, which is so much more crucial when you think about it. So we're not going to talk much about politics here because I know we're embracing vulnerability, but I wanted to get that out because I know that there was something that was a true passion of yours, and to encourage people to get out to vote, to understand the local elections just as much as they would a presidential election. But you are someone who has, I think, and this may be a recent development for you because I've discovered it for you recently, but have embraced vulnerability. You have written a book. You have been on different podcasts and different things talking about your life. What does when you think about vulnerability, how do you see that playing a factor in your life in terms of how you express yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Um, Vulnerability means a lot for me. I think even since the book, a lot of things have changed. I
Hmm.
thought when I wrote that book, even then, that it was a lot of impactful things that happened, which they were, and they really defined who I am as a person even now. But I think it's what actually happened after that book of writing vulnerability that really forced me to say, "Hey, it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing that you're somewhat experiencing, but you know what? It's time to go to the deep end of the pool
Mm.
and deal with it." So when I first wrote Weekend Reflections, it was my way of saying, as a black man from the South, um, I think in a lot of ways, and I was having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday. In a lot of ways we've been programmed to not be able to really express ourselves or to even feel. To feel means that we're weak. To feel means that obviously something is wrong with us as black men, particularly from the South,
Hmm.
because we're taught that if you hurt yourself, you should just shrug it off. You're not
Yep.
supposed to cry and say "ouch." You need
Wipe
to
some
get up.
dirt on it.
Otherwise, absolutely, you're not being a man. You're acting like a baby. You're acting like a little girl. Uh, you're acting weak. And so then what happens is you start growing up to where you become numb to everything in life. Even when you have excitement or joy that's happening, you're not supposed to feel that. You're just supposed to play cool. Um, if you are hurt and you want to cry about something, you're just supposed to shrug it off. You're not supposed to think about it. Which, in a lot of ways, what I've understood for myself is it got transferred into the one feeling that was okay to have, which was anger.
Absolutely.
Um, and not only, and I think I want to make sure that I say this part. And it was a friend that actually said this to me, and this might be, and it's going to go race based on this one. That sometimes our the dominant culture, they're okay with having feelings, but as Black people, we become our feelings, and
Mm.
that's where the issue becomes. So it's let's just say little Johnny, he's acting sad right now. But little Eric is an angry Black boy.
Wow.
We
Wow.
become what the
Yeah.
feeling gives. We don't get to feel the feeling. We
Mm-hmm.
become that, and then we're always stuck in that. So nobody sees me when I'm also happy, and nobody sees me when other things are happening. It's just that angry kid the whole time. Even when I'm not angry, I could be sad. I could be scared. I'm going to always be seen as angry.
Yep.
Um, and so I've had to make that distinction in my own life that I might feel anger does not mean that I am anger. Um,
I love that.
and so and so and so I have to make that distinction because that's what started happening in my life. I think even after I wrote that book, and I wrote that book in a very weird place. I first started on social media writing out, these different posts, and really it was accountability factors why I did it. I did it to say that if I put this out loud, then it means that I have to do what I'm saying I'm going to do because I've already put it out there. People have already saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if I didn't do it for them, I did it for me. It still doesn't matter because they saw it. And what started happening is I started realizing so many people started relating to it. So I would get direct messages from folks saying, "Man, keep speaking." They might not have ever even liked the post or anything, but they hit me up. I knew that it really was touching when I was talking to a council person at large that's probably very conservative, and I would have never thought that they could make that connection, and they really made that connection. And I said, "Wow." And so I decided, you know what, let me go ahead and turn this into a book. But I stopped, and I stopped for about 3 years, even
Wow.
creating that book. And then
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic happened, and then actually the tornado happened first in Nashville. Then the pandemic happened, um, and then I got really sick around the time George Floyd was killed. And I come to find out that my liver was shutting down. I found out that I had diabetes and I had high blood pressure. And when I thought I was just, having a good life during COVID where everybody else was, they couldn't talk to nobody, I thought I was living life. But the reality is that actually I was internally messed up
Wow.
in a lot of different ways, physically, mentally, and spiritually. And so when I was in the doctor and my doctor told me that, and I just happened to not be drinking during that time. I gave myself a pledge of not drinking for 1 year. And
Mm-hmm.
at the 6 month mark, the doctor told me that if I would have drank during that time, I would not be here. And that opened
Wow.
up my eyes very quickly. And I said, you know what, if I'm going to die, I at least want to make sure that I leave something behind. And so it caused me to finish that book. And I finished that book within 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
I started marketing it for about 3 months. I put it out, and it might be a small number to some folks, but to literally sell the book out of your trunk, and you sell
Yeah.
about 500 to 1,000 copies. I think that's
That's
phenomenal for
amazing.
me.
That is
And so
phenomenal.
and so I was really happy, especially for the price point that I did the book at too. I was really happy and honored that people actually wanted to hear my thoughts. But right after that, the sixth anniversary of me and my wife, she asked 2 weeks later, she asked for a divorce.
Mm.
And then my world really got rocked. And so right before that, I remember praying that I wanted to make sure that I was really, it's just like this book and it being successful. I wanted to make sure that I was really being open to my emotions.
Yep.
And when she asked for that divorce, boy, did I ever feel my emotions. And
Yeah.
that's honestly the truth. And so I started feeling sadness. I started feeling the grief of the death of that marriage happening to me. And then a lot of deaths around me started happening. I lost my best friend. I lost a woman that I looked at as my little sister. She was gone. Now I've lost my wife. I went through about maybe a half a year ago. I went through another breakup with another woman, and so life really took me to this place that I had to feel all those emotions and feelings so that I could get to the one point that I really wanted to, and that was to be able to see the light that was within myself. But to be able to see that
Yes.
light, sometimes you have to be okay going through that darkness. And so for
Yes.
me, vulnerability has really been my way of, I guess, just like the scripture says, walking through the valley of the shadow of death, but not fearing any evil. I think the reality for me is that I feared it for so long that at one point you have to just make that decision in your head to say, you know what, if I'm going to stay here, there's no reason being scared. I got to keep
Mm-hmm.
going through. There's no reason. I
Mm-hmm.
think Steve Harvey said it best. If you're in hell, why stop? Keep going.
Yeah.
You're already in
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah.
And so vulnerability has made me to say to Eric, this is who you are as a person. Let's keep shedding all that numbness. Let's keep shedding all that
Mm-hmm.
shielding. Let's keep shedding all that extra flesh and stuff that you, those calluses that you put on yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually, and let them go so that you can actually be open to the reality of life and what it has to offer for you. And so that's what I think the power of vulnerability has done for me.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I want to give that the space that it deserves because you hit on so many things that I felt and resonated with on the inside. Like like starting with, as a black man, we are identified directly with our emotions, directly with a lot of things that are usually negatively associated with us, but particularly our emotions. The angry black man, and one thing I learned, like I think vocabulary and words are so powerful, but in other languages, right? They don't use I am. They don't even have that phrasing when it comes to states of being. It is I have sadness, I have thirst, I have hunger, and I'm not those things. I don't identify with those things. And I think even just that small change in phrasing helps to separate, okay, I am a human being. I am right here as a human being who is feeling these things, who have these things around me. And so I appreciate you for talking about that. And there is so much to unpack with what you just said. And I think the one thing I like, you had a lot of personal things going on with your health, with your marriage, but also these big macro global things happening around us as well. How were your uh how was your personal life impacted, or was it impacted by the bigger issues that were going on? Where did you put the weight? Where was the weight given, or the I guess mental energy given?
That's a good question. I will. Are we able to cuss on this podcast, or should I keep it?
We embracing vulnerability. I want you
Okay,
to be
okay,
100% authentic.
okay. I'm gonna be very
I'm
honest
gonna
with
let me
you.
start for you. Fuck yeah, shit, hell yeah, god damn.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so let me say it like this. The pandemic had shit on my real life.
Mm,
It couldn't compare to it. I was actually one of the few people that never caught COVID. I still haven't caught COVID to this day.
wow.
But I just told you that my liver was shutting down, that I had high blood pressure. I'm now diabetic, which I'm grateful that I've kept it in line because of my diet. But it was probably the internal stuff, and I think this is really what's really more important about vulnerability is that when you've lived life so long numb, things like a pandemic doesn't bother you. If I
Mm-hmm.
went deeper, I lived in Memphis for about a year before, and I moved back to Nashville in November of 2019. My wife at the time did not come back with me. She stayed in Memphis,
Mm,
and I was in Nashville. Um, I was trying to keep that marriage, but at the same time, life still felt pretty peaceful being in a studio apartment by myself in the Gulch. So when the pandemic happened, the reality for me was I was actually just playing video games if I wasn't working.
yep.
I was on Zoom. I was talking to people. When IG was hitting with when Versus was really starting, I was just in the house having a party. And I
Yeah.
think the way my personality is anyway, I guess I'm half extrovert slash introvert. So I really wasn't feeling this pain of disconnection like other people were.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I thought.
Right.
Um, but I think but internally, I think that skin, that numbness was starting to shed. Um, and so when I dealt with the internal stuff, I think that's what was worse for me. It
Yep.
wasn't the pandemic and being disconnected, at least at that time. It was that I think that the universe was really starting to make me have to go on a journey within myself and
Mm,
say that if I'm supposed to be this person that really has this light that really is supposed to live into my greatness, then it's time for me to go on a ride. And
mm-hmm.
so I think a few things happened. One is that things that I thought that I loved were taken away from me to make
Mm-hmm.
me have to realize that I actually love that and that let me say it right. Did I actually love it more than I love myself? I don't think there was nothing wrong with me loving it. It was that I wasn't loving me. And I was
Yes.
using
Talk on that.
those things that I loved as a way of not having to deal with the love that I was not giving to myself. I was 70 pounds heavier than what I was now. It's nothing wrong necessarily with me being heavier. It was the fact that I was eating away my pain.
Yep.
I wasn't hungry. I was just chewing on stuff because those emotions that were within me that were starting to come out, I didn't want to deal with those. So I kind of stuffed them down lower by food. And I
Mhm.
wasn't eating the right food. So I was
Mhm.
eating foods that was really junk. And not only was it junk, it was spiritually making me full of junk. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think those things um, 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 really hit me in a manner to where I had to make a decision. And let me go further. I'm not even going to say I made a decision. I think the universe, God, made a decision for me
Mhm.
and said, "No, you're going to go down this road. You're going
Yeah.
to have to go through these things." I'm not a person that's really big on like pain with a purpose, but I am understanding that when pain comes, you do have a decision to make.
Yep.
And for me, for the longest, within the last 3 years since the pandemic, I was trying to get off this train. Every time this train kept going faster, it was going. I wanted to get off. I wanted somebody to say, "Hey, I don't have a ticket right now. I can't go to the next location. Let me off right here." And somebody said, "You know what? I'll pay for that ticket." No, you fine. Keep going down the road. And I had to experience things that were really scary for me. They were probably my
Mhm.
biggest fears to find out that really all of it was just in my mind.
Mhm.
To have somebody that I loved, and I'm not talking about my wife, but the past relationship that I had, to have somebody that I thought that I loved, really make me feel very low. Um, and I still love them. Was one of those things where I finally had to first learn the lesson of you can love something and know that you still have to leave it alone.
Mm.
um, to also understand that I wasn't the greatest person in my marriage. I was not the greatest husband. I would tell you I loved her. I think she understood that I loved her. But to be emotionally unavailable, to
Yep.
have an emotional affair, to be emotionally abusive, the reality was is that I had to let that go. And so I had to lose her to understand that I can't hold on to, again, me either becoming my feelings or numbing myself from those feelings.
Right.
I have to do something with that. To lose my best friend, to lose my favorite aunt, to lose a person, a woman that I considered my sister, was a way to say, you know what, Eric, you can no longer go through this life of not feeling. I mean, before those moments, I really was the person that could be in the funeral. And even when I was 19, 18, 19 years old, I lost my best friend. He was shot and killed.
Mhm.
I never cried.
Mhm.
I had a friend
Yeah.
that died in a car wreck when I was in college. I went to his funeral. Every eye in there was crying. I never cried.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't think I was allowed to cry for people that I loved. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until my friend that was a minister um, needed a heart surgery, but he couldn't get the heart because he was obese. And he was obese because he needed the heart. And he died at the age of 28 was the first time that I'm not even sure I felt, but it was the first time the tears fell from my eye at a funeral.
Wow. At
And ever
28
since,
years old.
for him being 28 dying, for me, I
Oh,
think I was 31, 32.
wow. Wow.
And that was the first time that I think that I allowed myself to cry. And now I can't. About a year or so, I went to a friend's funeral for his daughter. I never met her, never saw her in my life, but to see his pain caused me to
Mhm.
start weeping because that was his
Mhm.
daughter that he
Yep.
lost.
Yep.
And to hear him talk about the first few years, the first decade or so of her life, or maybe 2 decades, he was not the father of her. Somebody else was
Wow.
taking care. And then for him to make that connection and her to forgive him and for him to try to be the best father that he had only lasted for another decade. And she's no longer
Mhm.
here. But to see
Mhm.
that pain within him made me cry to say, man, um, I'm very happy that he's able to feel that pain
Yep.
because we numb ourselves. But I hate the fact that he has to feel that pain, but he shouldn't have to feel that pain by himself.
Yep.
So I was on the phone with somebody yesterday, um, and I think they talked about black men crying, and I told them a story about my own father. I was on the phone with him, and I'm about to be 40 next month, and my father's in his 60s,
Mhm.
and it was about maybe 7 years ago was the first time I saw my father cry,
Mhm.
and it was at his father's funeral, my grandfather. And so I remember one day I was on the phone talking to him, and I said, in some ways I kind of feel lesser than him because uh, I'd only saw him cry that one time in my life. And I said, for me, it's like I can't hold this stuff in no more. Like I'm just crying all the time, especially
Yeah.
during the divorce period. I was just crying all the time. And I said, how did did you ever feel that you cried, or that it was okay to cry? And my dad actually surprised me. He said, "Son, I cry every day."
Wow.
And I
Wow.
paused, and I think I even teared up yesterday when I said it out loud, because this whole time I'm thinking that I'm not being the man that my father was, because he just seemed so strong, because anytime I saw him, he never cried. And the reality was, no, I think there was a something that was lost for me to not see my father cry.
Yes,
Because if I would have
absolutely.
knew that my father had cried, I wouldn't have felt so quote unquote unmanly. I wouldn't have felt so
Right.
weak. I wouldn't have felt as if I wasn't a strong black man, when the reality was I've always been a strong black man,
Absolutely.
because
With
my
tears and
father was
all.
the example of a strong black man, because he's always been a very empathetic person. He's always been a good person. Um, I just never saw him cry, but that man
Hmm.
cried every day, and I just wish that I know we live in a society where again, black men are taught not to cry, that
Hmm.
we still have those examples of men that who are not afraid to cry,
Yeah.
because it lets me know one thing about us black men, that we have the right to be human just like anybody else.
Absolutely, and I love that. And when you talk about, um, you have a line in this book, and I thought it was so fitting. It says, "I guess what I'm trying to describe is how I felt about this perpetual process of suppressing my pain." And for all of those years of not crying because you felt like it wasn't what black men are supposed to do, what men are supposed to do, right? You still got pain on the inside, but you're just pushing it down. You balling it up. You balling it up. And that's something that I used to tell people. I used to tell people the same thing, where like from my dad got locked up when I was 8 years old. And from 8 to 16, my story was that I do not cry. I don't cry. I'm not gonna cry about nothing that happens. I don't care if a baby dies. I'm not crying. But that was partly of what I felt I should have been telling to the world, but it was false, because I would take times when I was by myself, and it was usually in the shower, and I would just bust out in tears damn near every day. And it was suppressing a lot of that pain when I should have been expressing, when I felt I should have been expressing emotion, throughout things happening. But if somebody's around watching me and they're going to be able to judge me and say that he's weak, he's soft, he's this because he's shedding some tears, I wasn't going to do it. And I do you now, as a almost 40-year-old man, do you still equate crying to weakness, or even showing emotion to weakness?
No, I think the strongest men are the men that are actually okay to feel to feel their emotions and actually express them outwardly. I
Mm,
think a man, to me, actually, when we talk about vulnerability, I think those are the strongest of men. Those who are allowed, who are okay with being vulnerable. Men that are okay to show you who they are all around, regardless if that's the good or bad, and then they still redeem themselves by, being better because of the bad. Um, just to change it a little bit, like I think for myself, I don't think crying is a weakness no more than I think not smiling is should be seen as being strong. I don't know if I talked
mm,
about it in the book, but I need to on my next one. I took away my smile. I took away my smile when I was 15 years old,
mm.
and I took it away because it was my way to not allow bullies to bother me anymore. If I was smiling, I thought I was, and I was people pleasing. I wanted everybody to feel good about themselves, even
Yep.
at the expense of me not feeling good about myself.
Wow.
And I remember um, a person made fun of me, and I think it was about because I always smile all the time, and it was something about my teeth. I think they said I had buck teeth or something. And I said, you know what? Just to show them that they ain't never gonna get the best of me, I'm not gonna smile anymore. So I
Mm.
stopped smiling. And really, I would probably tell you all the time I was happy,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't know that because my defense mechanism was to never let you see me smile, because I'm not here for your entertainment. I'm not
Yeah.
here to make you feel safe. And I'm not here to make me feel scared or insignificant if I do smile. I'm
Mhm.
not shucking or jiving when it comes to my smiling. But the problem with that was I was delaying my happiness for the sake of safety.
Wow.
and not necessarily for the enjoyment of my own self. And so it's taken this year for me to force myself to just smile to the point now that I'm smiling and I don't see it.
Yeah.
And there was a time that I would tell you that I was trying my best to try to smile, but I felt so fake smiling,
Yep.
or I felt that again, if I smile, somebody's going to say something that's going to make me shut that smile back down. And so this has really been a year of a lot of smiles for me. So just like shedding away, not being, shedding away this thought that I couldn't cry, I'm now also trying to shed away this thought of I'm allowed to smile. I'm allowed to do it for me. It's not for the purpose of trying to entertain folk. It's not for the purpose of making anybody else feel safe. It's for the purpose of me saying that, God damn it, I feel just as good as anybody else, and I'm allowed to show that
Let's
symbol of what
go.
my happiness looks like. And so that's why I think I've done a better job of smiling to say
Yeah.
that this is now my badge. This is who I am. This is for me to say that when you see that smile on my face, you're seeing me. You're seeing a person that is showing their light anytime that I open my mouth, regardless if that's through talking, regardless if that's through smiling. But that's where I'm on right now, is that I'm showing my light wherever I go. You're going to see Eric Brown whichever way that I want to be seen. Um, and I'm proud of that, man. It took me a long
Yes.
time. It took me almost 40 years to get to
Yes.
this point now
I
that
I
I
can
can be
feel
that
it.
person. Yeah.
I can feel that pride. I can feel it. Like the energy just jumped out of the camera. And I think like when you think about the emotions, right? The high, the good and the high emotions and the bad and low emotions, like we Brene Brown talks about it, where you can't, like, we try to mask and numb and suppress those negative emotions because they're heavy and they hurt. It hurts to be sad. It hurts to be in anger, even. It hurts in those negative emotions. But when you get so good at masking those negative emotions and numbing those, you also do the same thing to the positive ones. And so, like you said, like you weren't smiling, and yeah, and there were probably times where you couldn't even feel that happiness as much as you wanted to feel it, because you had gotten so conditioned to suppressing emotion in general that you stand at this baseline so that other people couldn't take advantage of your emotion, your smile, your whatever it was. And so I love hearing that you have stepped out of that and walked into who Eric Brown truly is. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm loving to see it. I'm loving witnessing it. Um, and what you just said, like, there's another line in this book that I thought was that needed to be said. There are things I want to say out loud, but I'm not going to risk a critique, a backlash, or being canceled simply because I need to release emotions just to be whole. I'm human. I want wholeness as much as anyone else. And it sounds like you're approaching that. It sounds like you're feeling that wholeness. Would that be a fair statement?
No, I think that's a great. What's the picture that's actually connected to that one right
This
there?
is
By
in
the way.
the intro. This is not even with the picture. So,
Yeah.
like, this was
Yeah.
early on.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What's up, Vulnerability Muscle fam? We've got an amazing sponsor to talk about today. And it's a product that has truly made a difference in my life. Call Me Go. Now, I only bring products that I believe in, and this is one that has been a game changer for me. Whenever I feel stressed, whenever I feel like things are just piling up and the anxiety is really cranking up, I turn to my Calm and Go device. This is it right here. This thing is literally a game changer, and I was skeptical about it at first, but what makes this thing stand out? It combines three scientifically proven methods to reducing anxiety. First, there's this grounding technique, multiple, sensory device. First, there's First, there's grounding technique, multi-sensory stimulation that really helps you stay present. So you have the feel of it. There's a vibration factor. There's lights. There's also smell. Then there's the scented element, tapping into the power of aromatherapy. But here's the kicker, and what really sets Calm and Go apart is personalized breathing regulation. It's like having your own breathing coach in your pocket, in your hand. And so I use this when I'm gearing up for podcasts, when I'm starting my day, when I'm calming down and chilling out at the end of my day. It has been an absolute game changer. I love Calm and Go because it's not a one size fit all solution. It's tailored to me, my body, my unique stress triggers. Now, I want you to experience the calm that Calm and Go can bring to your life. Head over to calmygo.com and use the code REGGIE444 at checkout for a fantastic $30 off. Trust me, this is an investment in your well being that you won't regret. Visit calmigo.com, use the code Reggie444 at checkout, and let Calmigo help you find calm in the storm.
Man, when I wrote that introduction, um, I really felt like God's hand was really guiding my hand while I was writing that. And what I mean more by that was when I put the book together, I had all the reflections, I put them together, and then somebody said, "You need to write an introduction to do this." And I was just hoping to jump right into the book and just do the reflections. And when I put the introduction in there, I swear it was like Hove in the studio, one take.
Yeah, let's
I just wrote
go.
that joint, I pressed enter, and I was done.
One
And
take, Jake.
it
Let's get
felt,
it.
yeah, man, it just felt good when I wrote that introduction. And I think it was for that point of like simply saying, I don't give a fuck. This
Yep.
is my way of writing this book, of saying that the things that I've always wanted to say, and also realizing that I'm not only freeing myself, but I'm freeing a lot of us Southern Black men that don't always have the
Hmm.
opportunity to say these things because we feel that we'll lose our job, we'll feel that we'll lose relationships, we'll be seen in a different light. When the reality for me was, hell, we've already been seen in this certain light. We've already been
Right.
seen. People have already generalized us. People have already put us in this box to say this is who we are. And it's like, man, you know what? Now is my time to break out of this fucking box. I don't want to be in this
Yes.
box no more. I want to
Yes.
be able to say that this is who I am on my own terms, and and even if you do say that this is who Eric is, I don't give a fuck about how you feel about me.
Yes.
I am
Yes.
here right now to say that this is who I am. I've given you the book, and if you can't accept the book and say that this is who I am, well, fuck it, that's on you. And
Right.
so I think that was my way of saying my book for me was my freedom papers. It was to say that I've crossed that Mason Dixon line, I've made it to the other side, but just like Harriet Tubman, I have to go back. And so,
Hmm.
though I have
Yeah.
these freedom papers, I got to make sure that the people that need to read this book are reading it, and those are the ones that are still back
Absolutely.
on the other side of that line. And so, that was just my way of saying, just like her, that I could have, I can free millions of others
Yep.
if they're open to opening their minds for themselves to allow themselves to be free. And so,
Absolutely. And that reminds me of kind of the thought process I had with my book. And so I write there are three big themes throughout, and then broken down into smaller ones. But the flow is normalization, realization, and then liberation. And so that normalization phase is all about the things that we equate to being normal, with it being I can't show emotion, with it being I have to live in these circumstances, I have to do things the way that they have always been done, and then getting to a point of realization where you get to take a step back. However it is you get that, it may be that you move, it may be that you move up a class to be able to look around and be able to have some time for yourself to actually have some of that introspection. And that's when I'm looking back at the normalized things and saying that's not normal, it shouldn't be normal, we should redefine normal in a way that is more healthy for us all. And then finally, liberation is when you find that self-love for yourself, when you put all the pieces together and say, you know what, I'm not going to continue down that path. I'm going to get free. I'm going to let these shackles break off of me so that I can feel better. And then I love what you said about going back, right? But the going back and saying, listen, this isn't necessarily the game plan that's going to work for everybody else, but it's a game plan that worked. And let's see if we can replicate it and duplicate it so that more people can get this feeling of freedom. I love that. You got me so excited right now. Like, switching gears a little bit. You got a line that says these self-imposed boundaries and limitations prohibit me from explaining my plight to other black men. What if in any regard of life, in any aspect of life, what were those self-imposed boundaries, those self-limiting beliefs?
it's a few of them, man. One is like you can't hug your homie the way that you want to hug your homie.
Mm,
Without realizing that you're going to feel like you're being homophobic,
yeah.
or I am. Let me say it right, I am being homophobic because I want to go up to my brother, I want to give him a hug, but instead we do like the church hug. Let's do the clap and let's just put the one hand on the back. When the reality is that what I know now is that every human being needs at least 8 hugs a day.
Yes.
And when I read that, I was like, wow, like I've been missing out on a lot of hugs, man. Like to make those connections, to make it's actually healthy for us to get those 8 hugs a day. And I think about that more of like, man, I need to make sure I get my 8 hugs.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one face to say that I'm embracing you, I'm hugging you, I'm embracing you in a manner to say that no, you are my people's. Which goes into my second part of being able to tell another brother that you love them.
Yes.
Um, It's not an
Yes.
erotic. It's not an erotic love that I have for you. For those who it is, that's a beautiful thing too. But for me, it's just simply saying that I have this philos, I have this brotherly love for you. You are my family. I see you within this moment. Instead of worrying about that, when I say I see you, it means as if I'm laying my eyes on you in a manner that could be harmful to you. And I think that's what a lot of black men have within themselves. They can't be vulnerable because if I do that, it looks like to the other person I'm being harmful to them, which therefore makes it to where they're going to attack me. To
Mm-hmm.
be able to talk to somebody and say that, what, this person broke my heart. This person makes me sad. You can't even have those conversations with other brothers without them saying, man, you being a pussy right now.
Mm-hmm.
You acting like a bitch right now. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, this is how I feel right now. And
Yeah.
I should be able to say that. Or the part that sometimes we should be able to talk to each other in peaceful manners that's not always having to put each other down. I shouldn't always have to say truth in a joke
Mm-hmm.
to make it to where somebody gets it. And it's still done in a manner that still hurts that person. They laugh it off. They might joke about it, or we say it in such an insult, or we think that we have. No, it's just that we should be able to just say that, man, as each other, we love one another. And I respect you as a person, and I want to make sure that there's no harm that happens to you.
Yep.
Um, and I think that sometimes you're not allowed to say that because we do not allow ourselves to be open enough to do that.
Yep.
I think Bell Hooks in one of her books that I read definitely talked about that. I think the way that we even when we're not being vulnerable, when we're not allowing ourselves to feel, she simply says that there's a few ways that we do that, and one of them is we do it through sex or we do it through power. And so we start replacing love with lust. This is our way to conquer. And another thing that she points out in this book is that when we have these heteronormative relationships with our, between a man and a woman, to really have this connection of loving this other person, with men, if we no longer get that feeling of attention, or that feeling of feeling that we can be soft with the person that we with, we will replace that with that attention from another person, in whatever regards that might look like, uh, uh, and instill this lustful manner for us to feel that we're fulfilling something that's not actually fulfilling us. And I
Mm-hmm.
got to be honest with myself. This is what something that happened with my divorce. That happened is that me and my ex-wife got into a huge fight where I would tell you I was being very vulnerable with her, and she didn't like the manner of that vulnerability, and I felt attacked, and I felt very attacked, and I snapped to the point that where that snapping looked like, what, I'm never going to tell you anything else about me again.
Yeah.
I'm going to, and so I shut down. And so those things that I would normally share with her, I no longer shared with her. That I shared that with another woman. And though, yeah, there was no sex, I might as well have had sex with the woman, because something that was very intimate for us that we would talk about was no longer between us no more. I took
Mm-hmm.
that to another person that I felt heard, I felt seen, and they made me feel as if there was nothing wrong with me and special. But what would that look like if I could have still left open that gate, that left open
Yep.
that door to say, though this made me feel hurt, though I felt attacked, I should be able to go back to my wife at the time and be able to say that, what, this is how this made me feel. Um, I don't think that it's your job to have to bring me back to life because this hurt me, but I do want you to know that this is how this felt, this is how I expressed, and if we understood one another, we probably would have took that in consideration and did that. But that's not what I did. Instead, I
Mm-hmm.
made a decision and a choice to say that I will never share any vulnerable information with you again, and I want to share it with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
As a
if I'm
matter of
being,
protecting your heart.
as trying to protect my heart, when the reality is sometimes the best way to protect your heart is to leave your heart open.
Mm.
Um, and I know that's fearful. Nobody goes into a battle asking to get hit, but we should expect to get hit. It
Yeah.
is a battle, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what the civil rights movement, just to kind of, I guess, make this analogy, that's what the civil rights movement did in a lot of ways, where people were throwing food and drinks on them, burning them with cigarettes, smacking them, hitting them, showering them with hoses, and then they still went back up to them and said that no matter what you're going to do to me, I'm still going to leave myself open to you to let you know that I still am resisting you by not harming you, though you're harming me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the same way that we should think in our relationships. And that's the scariest shit in the world,
Yeah.
because both of us, we both from Nashville.
Yeah.
I'm from
Yeah.
Woodbine. I lived most of my life out north. I'm never gonna let no nigga put his hands on me. That's just
Right.
not how I'm supposed to
Right.
operate, right?
Right.
But I do get the understanding of, hey, brother, you have been in this destructive manner for so long in your life that all you know is this.
Right.
What
Yep.
happens if I put that down and just say that, you know what, I'm tired of holding all of these burdens of not being able to speak on things that are harming me,
Mm-hmm.
uh, not being able to tell somebody else my true feelings about them in fear that they're going to hurt me, um, and just throwing that down to the side and saying, you know what, I'm open.
Yep.
And I think I'm at that place in my life now to where um, it's less energy um, to just be open than it
Yes.
is for me to not talk about things, not be cool, but yet I'm overthinking and that, I'm having this depression, I'm having anxiety, all these other things that are really happening to me. I just now got to the point now that I can actually listen to music and I can start understanding words again. I would have never
Yeah.
told nobody that out loud. I just would listen to music and be like, man, I don't know what's going on. So I just rock to the beat.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm realizing the more that I'm shedding a lot of these burdens, the more I'm able to feel again. I'm able to see again. The colors are brighter for me again. The words are actually there, and I can hear them now. But that took a lot
Wow.
of the fact of just being honest with myself and saying, you know what, it's time to let these burdens down.
Definitely. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And keeping your heart open, that's hard when I think when people hear embracing vulnerability or even think about vulnerability, they think about doing something that then can backfire and be used against them. And so they shut down and they lock that down. But I think to your point, keeping your heart open and expressing yourself the way that you do and loving yourself the way that you do, fuck what anybody else is gonna say or do toward you. Like I know where I'm at, I know my truth, and I'm gonna walk in that. So I love that. I love that. Let's switch
And
gears a little
also
bit.
this though,
Oh,
Reggie,
go
and
ahead.
before
Go
we
ahead.
switch,
No,
I
go
just got to
ahead.
I got to make sure I say this part. All that stuff you just said, it is going to happen.
Yes,
Somebody's
it's
going to
real.
hurt
It's
us.
life.
Somebody's
Yeah.
going to do all that. But I have to make a decision within myself, though. Though that hurt me, does that mean that I still act out of that I'm no
Right.
longer acting who I am as a person?
Right.
And even with me being numb or me being closed off, they still hurt us.
Yep. Yep.
All I
Yep.
did was put up a shield that still did it, and still
Yeah.
and still might have holes in it and can still get rocked. But I still got to make a decision of: am I going to continue to hurt myself to protect myself, or am I going to open myself up and realize that there's a fuller life that's out there, despite the fact that I might feel hurt, but I still have the access to feel good too.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh man. So Eric, you're a very accomplished man and very educated man. Talk about your path through education, and then any challenges that have come up with your professional career, anything like that as you've seen it.
Yeah, man. I mean, number one, both of us are Vandy men, anchored down
Anchor down.
all day.
Can I tell the
VU.
story real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
How we met?
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
so Eric is a proud member of the Sigma fraternity, and I coming from a family where nobody went to college. I didn't know anything about anything. Fraternities, this, that, and another. And I got this email one day from one of your brothers, Trey Herndon, and it was inviting us to a informational meeting. And in the email, he says, "Show up at 9:14." And I'm looking at it, I'm like, it must be a typo. So my young, naive ass is just like, okay, Trey, should I? And it wouldn't have made a difference, right? But I gotta make it perfect. You mean 9:15 or 9:41? Like, I'm like, what do you mean? You want to explain why 9:14 was so significant and why my dumb ass should have just showed up and not asked that question?
Yeah, because that was 14 is the year that my fraternity was founded, 1914. So either
1914.
we do it in military time, so it's 7:14 in the military time, 7:14 p.m. is 1914, or we do 9:14, which is still a link back to 1914.
Man, I laugh every time I think about that, but that's where we first met. So sorry to
Yeah,
cut you off, but Vanderbilt,
no,
that's yeah.
yeah, man. So education is interesting for me, even now and even then, because I always go back to the root word of education. It actually is like the name of what Moses is, because Moses was drawn out of the water, and that's really what education is. It's drawing what's already within you. It's drawing it out of you. So if we think about education from that standpoint, education is not what we put inside of ourselves. Um, it's actually what was already inside of us that we allow to be seen, which in essence truly is vulnerability. And
Hmm.
vulnerability is allowing what's in you to be seen outside of you by others
Yes.
to see that. And that's truly the real way of what education is. And so it didn't start off like that for me. I've always been a smart guy. I had a mother that really taught me how to read and write when I was 3 years old. In fact, when I was still 4 years old when I started kindergarten, and they wanted to take me out. They said I was very immature, but I was the smartest kid in the school, and so my mom would not allow them to take me out. And so my grades were great. Um, but I had issues with teachers, and so this is why I also say teachers are very important for students. When I was in first grade, I had a teacher. It doesn't matter now. Her name is Mrs. Poe. When I was at Whitsett Elementary School, and it was to the point that she would always say that I was in trouble, and say that I did something. I did something. She programmed the kids that one time I was on the other side of the room, and something fell on the other side of the room, and she said, "Who did that?" And the class was already programmed to say Eric. And so right
Wow.
there, I could have easily went down that cradle to prison pipeline system,
Mm.
because somebody had already programmed a classroom to just assume that if something bad happened, it was Eric that did it. And my mother took me out of that class and she put me in a black teacher's class. That woman's name was Mrs. Chandler, and Mrs. Chandler knew how to deal with me. I'm looking at my dog, making sure she ain't doing nothing. My
Oh,
fault.
good.
And so Miss Chandler took care of me, and it's because she saw what was inside of me, and she allowed me to see that. So I was a good reader, I was a good writer. When I got to second grade, I was good at math. These things shown, and then we moved. I left right middle school. Ended up going to Case and Lane Elementary School in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I almost went down that path again. Again, I was the smartest kid in the classroom. But again, I got labeled because I was one of the only black kids in the classroom. I got labeled as this bad kid. When reality was I was just a really smart kid that wanted to discover things. I wanted to know everything I could. But that for somebody equal to me wanting to know more, equal to me being a troublemaker.
Mm.
Um,
Wow.
and I think about that with a lot of black men, a lot of black boys that are just trying to discover life. They're not holding a gun up. They're not hurting anybody. They are just trying to discover life, and it's been become criminalized for them to discover life. To
Wow.
where again
That's
we shut
powerful.
down, right? And so went to Riverdale High School. Love Riverdale. I'm a warrior for life. But it was there that, and Case Lane, but definitely in high school at Riverdale, I was able to really feel the arts, and so I was always a good poet. So I would write all the time, which is what got me into music. So I would write raps. I was a musician. I was playing in the band, and then I translate that over into producing songs. So hip hop became a real big thing for me. Um, um, and so it became more of music, arts, dance. And so I started dancing with the halftimers. Riverdale, we was one of the best. We was always winning championships to the point that I actually became a choreographer for Riverdale, and we were still
Wow.
winning championships. And then I went to Middle Tennessee State University. I went there wanting to be a recording engineer. I wanted to own my own record company. So it was between that or Miami University, which sometimes I wonder if I should have picked Miami. But life has this way of showing you of who you're supposed to be. And so I went there, and then 9/11 happened. And
Mm.
when 9/11 happened, it was very weird for me because I was hearing a lot of theology or a lot of church beliefs that God was destroying New York because of homosexuality and
Oh,
those who worshipped Islam.
wow.
And even as a Baptist kid, then my critical skills were always pretty strong because of my father. That made no sense to me,
Yeah.
um, and it bothered me. But it bothered me so much that I started finding myself wanting to be in. Not no, let me say this right. I found myself struggling with trying to figure out if I was being called to ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really within this hip hop culture of where I was trying to gather these thoughts of I love hip hop. I love not only the music, I love the dance, the b-boying, writing lyrics, also the culture that has been created from it. But I was trying to figure out and understand how do we as people fit within this world, being told that this is what God believes, this is what we as Christians believe, with a world of so much diversity and different perspectives of who I am supposed to be as a person. So I left there, went to the school called Tennessee Temple University, which is a very fundamentalist, predominantly white Christian school. That is really where I experienced most of racism. And to be honest, most of my racism has always been experienced within a Christian context.
Mm.
Even from when I was in daycare, from from kids us being in Bible study telling me that I want to be white, to then going to a school that told me that if I was not a Christian I would be in Africa butt naked not knowing Jesus. Those are literally the words that were told to me.
Wow.
And so then I got depressed. And so I found that I was depressed because I was a psychology major and started reading on abnormal psychology and said, wait a minute, whoa. Oh God, I'm depressed.
Yeah, they live in my house. They watching me.
They're right here.
Yeah.
And so I ended up being so depressed that I actually dropped out of school there. And I went to my parents' alma mater, American Methodist College, the same school that John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, Bernard Lafayette went to. But I only stayed for a semester and I dropped out. And I dropped out because I needed a car. And to have a car meaning I needed a job, but to have the job, I needed the car. And so I got caught in that
Right.
cycle. And so I started working for a subcontractor of Nissan called Tower Automotives, where I was welding car frames together. I did that for about 2.5 years. And one day online, before I came to work, I went to this library in Cleveland, Ohio, where my father's from, and I found this book. It's called Black Noise, which I thought was a very interesting name. So I looked it up. It was by a woman named Dr. Trisha Rose. And she talked about hip hop from the academic level. And I just like, you can actually talk about hip hop in college and get a PhD for it. That's interesting. So I used to read the book online. So I would weld the car frame and then I would go over once I hit my button and I would start reading the book. And
Mm.
that book actually caused me to go back to school.
Yeah.
And so I went back to school. American Baptist College still being a very Christian theological school, but it teaches more liberation and Black theology. So a more very liberal perspective of what Christianity should look like, which some people might say is the way that Jesus was. I don't necessarily think Jesus was political in those ways, but I do believe that Jesus had a very liberative understanding of who people were because Jesus was one of us. And so I went to school for there, and I got my bachelor in biblical theology. And then I made it. And then during that time, I actually became a community organizer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually went to Geno, Louisiana. Um, and from Geno, Louisiana, I realized I'm not sure if I want to do this community organizing thing anymore because it's not the peaceful journey that I thought it would be. It was actually full of very complicated perspectives that I just wasn't sure that though I want justice, this is the way to get justice. And so I said, I'm going back to school. And so I said, I'm only going to put in for one graduate school. I put in for Vanderbilt University and I got in. And so then I got a master's in theological studies. And then I got another degree, a MA, which I got in ethics and society.
Wow.
Um, and so I thought I was going to do a PhD, but I had a professor, Dr. Victor Anderson, great man. I still consider my academic father. And he looked at me straight up when I said I want to do a PhD. And he said, Eric, you'd be a great student, but you need to get the fuck out of here. And I was like, whoa. I was like, well, I was like, Victor, like for real, like, I'm a good student. Why would you do that to me? He said, Eric, you need to get the fuck out of here. And I said, why? I said, I want a PhD. And he told me because he said the market is bad. I would be doing you a disservice to get you a PhD for you to still not be able to find a job. And it was
Mm.
probably one of the best decisions that was made for me.
Wow.
Because the moment that I got a job over for Children's Defense Fund, um, I was actually making more than some people with a PhD were making going to go teach at a school. And
Yeah.
so for me, education has not only been the academic rigor, it was also the life experiences that helped me to understand why education was so important for me. Those life experiences pulled things out of me that I did not know was there. I would not have told you that I was a good leader. I would not have told you I was a great speaker. I would not have told you that I have a connection to connect people from various different standpoints and bring them together to where they become friends. But it was those experiences on top of the continual literature that was in front of me, the continual people that I learned from and gleaned from that made education so important for me. And so I'm really big on, I don't necessarily think people need to go to college, but if you do have, but what I will say about college is not necessarily a place you go to find a job. College is a place that you go to figure out who you are as a person. And
Yeah.
from there, you can discover what it is that you want to do for a job, what is your passions, and what you can do. And I think sometimes so many of us are only going to school because parents have told us that, hey, you need to become a lawyer, you need to become a doctor, you need to make this amount of money so that way you can provide for your family. And what I'm coming to see, especially during the pandemic, is that so many people took on titles and jobs and made them their calling when the reality was it was just a way of life to help them to survive.
Yeah.
And so many of us took out all this college debt. So many of us went to school and did these jobs thinking that we would fall in love with being happy to make this money, to only go there and say, you know what, this money is not what it's cracked up to be. I'm glad to have it, but I'm losing my soul
Yes.
trying to stay
Yes.
within this job And mine was actually the opposite. I went after a passion, and the problem, only problem with that passion was is that work was 24/7. I could never turn my brain off. Even when I wasn't at work, I was still working, to where I had to figure out that I am not my job. I am not what
Yes.
I do. I am actually who I am, and because of who I am, I get to decide what it is that I'm going to do for myself to provide for me, so I can have this form of freedom. And so,
Yes.
education is freedom for me. I just don't always think it's for school, and I think sometimes we have misinterpreted what college is supposed to be. And some of the smartest people I know are people that never went to college. In
Absolutely.
fact, they have they have people that went to college working for them.
Yeah.
So more for me is that education is really just that experience plus what it is that we decide to document, read, record, and then make some form of a critical thinking. It's not necessarily about figuring out what to think more than it is of how do we think, and
hmm
taking all those different pieces and then using it in a manner to where it's something that's good for society, and that's what education
I
is
love
for me.
that. Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to hit on something you said about, people becoming so wrapped up in their job and they're in the process of doing. We are human beings. And I think the way that our capitalistic society has shaped us, we become these human doings. And it's like
Mm,
we have to unlearn that. We have to undo that and come back to the being. We got to be a human first and know that, again, just like we were talking about with the emotions, we aren't those things, they're a part of us. And
mhm.
so I love that. I wanted I'm not gonna cut this off. We're gonna keep going for a little bit longer because I want to hear I want to hear about some of the challenges you've had as someone who is 'cause I think there is a reflection in here about being overqualified for this job, but then being told that you aren't qualified enough for this
Mm,
job, but
mm, mm,
being
mm,
being
mm.
stuck in the middle of that. Talk about that as a black educated black man who
Man,
who really is so competent and can do it all.
man, that's yeah, man. I forgot I put that in the book, and I love, and shout out to Xavier Payne, X Payne. X Payne is the one that did the illustrations for my book. So a lot of people don't
Beautiful.
see my book, but my book is actually what I call a children's book for adults. I have
I
the
love
small
that.
reflections of I have the small reflections of what the book's about, and then I have a drawing that goes along with the book so that people can make the connection of the visuals. And so that's my book right there that Reggie
Oh
you're
yeah.
holding up. Um,
hmm
uh, I wanted to do that on purpose because it was almost a way of saying I looked at this book like the DJ versus the MC. So Eric B and Rakim are some people that are really big influence on my life, and what I realized is that the DJ was the one that really set the stage for the MC to be able to come in and use the words and lyrics to motivate people. And so it's the same way at the book is that X Pain um, created the picture by drawing the picture to set that platform so that when I said the words, people already get this
hmm
mental picture within their head and they feel like they're already within it. And so, shout out to X Pain for that. Going back to your question, the uh, overqualified, the over under routine, if you will. That's truly, I think, been the life of Black folk in general.
hmm
I don't even think that's just me. That is just in general. We were always taught to be three times better than white people just to get half of what they have, which I say now, fuck that. I should be able to, and I understand the systemic reality that happens for us of that. Yes, we do always have to be 2 to 3 times better, but I don't want my kids to have to go through that,
hmm
and I don't want to train my kids like that. I want to be able that when I do have kids and train them to tell them, hey, you be your goddamn self. And they're going to accept you or they're not going to accept you. And if they don't, you have the power and you have the power, you have the resources, because I'm going to make sure you have the resources to be able to do this for you. We are in a reality now, and I think you know this very well. We're very entrepreneurial now. We don't have to work for somebody else. I mean, it's easier sometimes to not deal with the stresses of life, but entrepreneurially, we have the way to be able to create what the world that we want to see.
Yeah.
And so for me, my challenge has been a lot of times that I've said it earlier, I have 3 degrees, two of them from a top 15 school in the nation that's almost becoming close to a top 10 school. And I would go to a job and they would say, actually, you're able to do my job for me. And so I wasn't going after their job. I'm going after the job that's under them. That's what I wanted.
Right. Right.
And so I didn't get neither job because I think the reality of that is that I became a threat. But then I would go to other places And I had all this education. They said, I don't have the experience to get this job. For the past year, I've actually made it to the finals of at least 7 jobs to not get the job. I
Mm,
would hear the remarks of, we want diversity in this place, which is always a telltale sign to me that I'm probably not going to get the job. And it's really just their way of saying that we're not racist.
mm-hmm.
is the real reality, and they have to say that on the front end, so that when they do pick the white woman or the white man, they can at least say that no, we strive to make sure to pick those who would make this place diverse.
Right.
And what I've had to realize within myself is sometimes I'm just not the person that's supposed to work for somebody.
Yeah.
Um, I'm the person that's supposed to create the path that others are going to be able to walk down. And that sucks because sometimes it means that I don't get to have the concrete paved road. It means that I have the dirt, the mud, the grass, the weeds that might have snakes in it that's going to bite at my leg. And I have to find a way to be able to cut down the grass to see the snakes and move the snakes out the way. I'm going to have to be the one that's going to have to break up the ground. I'm going to have to be the one that's going to have to put the concrete down and make it smooth. And I may not ever get to ride or walk on that path, but I've had to create that path so that others behind me can do that. But the only way that I can do that is I have to be honest with myself of knowing that I've always had the experience. I've always had the education. Um, Maybe I wasn't the fit for the culture. Is what the place is going to say, and I don't always agree with that. I think anything I've ever touched I've made it better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still going to keep that mentality. It might sound cocky, but that's just the truth. Anywhere I've been, I've made the place better. And there's a reason why. It's because of trauma. Trauma has made it to where I feel that if I don't do a job correctly, it's going to always come back that I'm not worthy, that I am not valuable,
Yep.
and that there's something wrong with me. And because of that trauma, it forced me to go 2 to 3 times harder in anything that
Yep.
I did. That I became a perfectionist. That's not always a good thing. But I do know that at least left a great quality product afterwards. And so
Yes.
I think the bigger thing that I want us to know as people of color, particularly Black folks, is that man, fuck their standard of what our life is supposed to be. If you didn't get the job, then be happy that you didn't get that job because I'm probably very sure that you're going to find some things out about that job that you didn't want in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
If those jobs lay you off and fire you, yes, it's going to suck, but be happy because I guarantee you something better is on the way. And then sometimes many of us, and this is a lot of my friends, they lost jobs or downsized from jobs, and it forces them to have to create their own companies, their own consulting firms. And now they're striving at least monetarily, or they're striving to have a lot of access and opportunity to things that are going on. Yes, that still comes with stress. That still comes with, am I going to be able to pay my staff? All that's going to be there. But I think again, the reality is that they had to bet on themselves,
Yes.
and I think that's what I've gotten out of the over under
Yeah.
of a lot of these lives is that regardless of what somebody is trying to define for me or determine for me, I have to bet on me to keep going, and I'm proud of that
Absolutely.
because I would have told you last year I really didn't have a job last year, but I never missed a bill. I never missed a
Mm-hmm.
meal. Everything was paid for. To now, I'm in this great place that I'm staying in. Even though y'all can't see it, I'm in this great place. My car is paid off. I have no real debt beyond school debt. But um, it took me having to go through those unpaved journeys to get to this
Yes.
place, and hopefully, the people after me don't have to go after that.
Yes, it reminds me of what you were talking about when with the pandemic and the personal things that are going on in life. Like I refer to it as like this reference point that you have, or this bottom line that you have. When that's set so low, all this other stuff becomes kind of minute, and you're able to persevere through it all. And your story is a testament to that. Just so much perseverance from your educational journey to the career that you are in, and will continue to develop as a strategist, as a consultant, and doing everything that you're doing. So I'm super proud of you as a man, as a black man, as a black man who embraces vulnerability. I got a couple of quick rapid response questions I want to ask you, and just feel free to say the first thing that's on your mind. All right. What comes to mind when you hear the word vulnerability?
Great question. Hey, I know this is rapid response. um, the first thing I think about when I think of vulnerability is opening yourself up even after you've been hurt.
Love it. If you could have a conversation with one person, living or dead, who would it be?
James Baldwin, any day of the week.
Ooh. What is one of your favorite childhood memories?
Playing baseball with my little brother.
Nice. I love that. What is a book or movie that everyone should read or watch?
Mm. I'll go with both of them. If you go with a book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley and Malcolm X. And if you
Mm-hmm.
go with movie, I'm going to probably tell you Inception is probably the movie I
Ooh,
think everybody should watch.
I love it. What is one thing you do to relax when you're feeling stressed?
One thing I do to relax when I am feeling stressed, I would probably say meditate.
Yes, yes, yes. And then lastly, what is the number one podcast you've ever experienced?
Oh, that's easy. Embracing Vulnerability with Reggie D. Ford.
Eric, I appreciate you, my man. This was a great conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
There's a few ways, man. First, again, man, thank you for allowing me to be on your show, man. This is really, truly a privilege, and I really appreciate that. You can reach out to me on Facebook, the Eric Brown Venture. I also have a page, Eric E. Brown Jr., that's also on Facebook. You go to Instagram, I believe I am at EEBJ. I definitely know that on Instagram I have at Eric Elton Jr. That you can also find me on there. And I have my website, SDStrat, which is SDSTRAT.com. And you can find out more about me there. And if not, you can easily find my book, Weekend Reflections, either on Amazon or wherever they're selling books at.
Absolutely. And I'll put all that in the show notes so that people can find you because I know some people want to contact you. With all the things that you could be doing and all the places that you can be, I appreciate you for being here with me, embracing vulnerability. Thank you, Eric.
Likewise. Appreciate you, Reggie. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of Vulnerability Muscle. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that resonate with you. If you're enjoying this journey of self discovery and empowerment, there are a few ways you can support the podcast. First, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. If you've been moved by our conversations and the mission of redefining vulnerability, please consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps others discover the podcast. Share your thoughts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. And don't forget to spread the word. Follow us on Instagram at Vulnerability Muscle for updates, and you can connect with me personally at Reggie D. Ford on all platforms. Visit vulnerabilitymuscle.com for additional resources and upcoming episodes. And remember, embracing vulnerability is strength. Thanks for being a part of the journey. Until next time, stay empowered, stay vulnerable, and keep flexing that vulnerability muscle.